And this is how you fix a clock.
Kind of dick with somebody to throw up and that's when you do it.
What?
Especially since it's not there. Let me get some of the stuff that I use. Huh?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ryan, and today we're going to learn how to clean some OR equipment. Now, the first thing you want to do before you go and grab a stretcher is to make sure and notify the OR staff or the GI staff that you're taking a stretcher and that they have the availability that they don't need it. After that, first you want to take the cushion and the headrest and put them on the elevator. And you probably cut out. Look, all right. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is we want to take our clean bucket and make sure we rinse out the dirty water and grab a fresh rag. Okay, now that we have our fresh rag and our fresh Vindicator solution, we want to prep some of the other things that we're going to use to clean the stretcher. One of the most important things is nail polish remover. This will get any of the tarnishes off, the Benadine, any of the sticky substances that may be stuck on things like the headrest or the handles. Also, we use alcohol pads. It's not as strong of a solvent, but it will get out some of the stains that maybe the nail polish will not. Finally, we use a product called Unisolve. Unisolve gets all the sticky substances off, and that way you can delete stuff, right?
If I have to, yeah.
Okay. And finally, we're going to use Unisolve. Unisolve is a solvent that gets off any of the sticky substances. First thing we're going to do for the OR stretchers in particular, since they have so many moving parts, is we're going to pump up the stretcher. and we pump up the stretcher using one of these pedals down here. There are 3 pedals. One is for steering, one is to adjust the pitch of the stretcher, and finally the other one is to raise the stretcher. So we're going to go ahead and raise the stretcher all the way to its full extent. Being careful not to slam the pedal on the ground because that'll chip the metal. We've reached our final pitch. We're going to go ahead and open this up. And there's a lever down here that raises and lowers the bed. So we're going to go ahead and crank that up to make some of the other parts more accessible. We have a connection over here on this side of the maintenance shop. It's non-filtered air, but it'll dust off any of the particles before you start cleaning. Kind of like you sweep a floor before you mop it. So we're going to go ahead and make sure, in particular, as I said, with all the moving parts, so we're going to get really good inside of there. Make sure to get inside all the tubes. There's probably 6 or 7 different tubes that need to be cleaned out. Now that we think we've gotten the back clean, we're going to go ahead and work on these railings. This in particular, because it's going up and down all the time, seems to have a lot of dust, so we want to make sure we get this part really well. Going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Now you'll find that the bottom of these stretchers, this plate here, will be the most dusty, as that's where it all collects. So we want to make sure and get that very well. Okay, now that we feel that we've dusted off those areas, we're going to take this bottom plate here and lift it up. This plate won't stay up by itself. You need to balance it on these 2 screws. There's a screw here and a screw here. That'll let you get under the stretcher. So once again, we're going to take our air hose and make sure we blast out all these surfaces and crevices really well. It's a good idea to concentrate on the wheels. A lot of the dust and garment fabric gets stuck inside the wheels. Okay, now the dusting is complete and we can go ahead and start washing. To begin with, you always want to put your stretcher on lock. Once again, to reiterate, this pedal is used for steering. It's either green for steer or red for lock. The center position is neutral. So we want to go ahead and put our stretcher on lock. That way we can work with it and it won't move around. Next, we are going to take our Vindicator solution with our fresh rag and make sure to dunk it in there and rinse it out very well. We have our rinsed rag. We're going to go ahead and start on the railings. So once again, with the railings, there are all kinds of parts and crevices that you need to get inside to make sure it's a proper clean. So I take my rag and I make sure that I get inside this bottom crevice here. Next, we're going to work on the poles. With the poles, you do a basic cleaning of the pole and worry about the details later. Now, to keep your vindicator and your rag fresh, it's a good idea to continuously rinse and squeeze out the excess water. We're going to go ahead and clean the railings on the opposite side. So first, I'm going to clean this top black part, making sure to get inside the bottom crevice. Next, I'm going to clean the poles. Now we're going to focus on this top area. This top area can be full of any kind of different solution that they may use in the OR. There's a solution called Benadine, which leaves kind of an orangish yellow stain on the stretcher. Benadine is almost nearly impossible to get out with pure vindicator, but right now we're just focusing on the basic disinfection of the stretcher. Once again, we will worry about the details after. If you notice at times, especially if the stretcher has been out of commission for a while, that these Velcro pieces will get very dusty. Dust is important to keep out of the operating rooms as it's supposed to be a sterile environment. So if you notice excess dust on this piece of Velcro, take the air hose and make sure and blast it out. Next, we can go ahead and unlock our stretcher to put it in a more desirable location for what we're cleaning. I'm going to go ahead and focus on this back part here. This is one of the most important parts to focus on, as this is where most of the OR staff is touching. They're touching these 4 handles in order to get the stretcher up and down. So we want to make sure to clean the handles along with the metal behind it. We will worry about the details after. For these hydraulic pieces in particular, there is a crevice right here that seems to collect a lot of dust. It's very important to get the dust out of there. Whether you would like to use a Q-tip or the corner of a rag. There are certain pieces in the back that it feels like maybe it's hard for you to reach. There are different approaches for this. You can either go underneath, or if you feel that you can put your hands there, that's an efficient way to clean it. Okay, now that the top has been disinfected, we're going to focus on the under regions of the stretcher. Once again, I'm going to unlock my stretcher and put it in a more desirable location. I can go ahead and take this plastic piece and fold it back down. I try and focus on the tops of these rails before I do the bottom, as I know that's where most of the stains are going to be. Okay, this crank that we talked about earlier has a specific grease that is used to make sure that it's well lubricated. This grease, first of all, does not come off. Second of all, is very important for the function of the crank. So it is not something that you need to worry about. We're going to go ahead and disinfect this along with the cylinder. Now we can go ahead and take this upper portion of the stretcher, lift it up, and clean underneath. I like to do the four corners first. That way I know that all I have to do is the middle. Make sure to get in between the spaces and the bars that run underneath. You'll find an occasional rust spot or mark. It's not really something you need to be concerned about. This is more of a disinfection. Making sure to cover every square inch of the stretcher. Now, for the rubber that hides the hydraulics, we want to take our rag and go ahead and fold it out. That way it's almost like a pizza in your hand. You're going to take our rag, we're going to go up and down every single groove in the stretcher. Even this bottom part where most of the dust collects. We're going to go ahead and rinse our rag again. We can go ahead and fold our rag back up. Now, most of the stretchers have IV poles at the bottom. They store them at the bottom, that way that when they use the stretcher, an IV pole is available. These IV poles also need to be cleaned, but first, before you clean them, you got to make sure you extend them to the full point. Otherwise, you're only cleaning what you see. Making sure to clean the knob and clean the rest of the pole. It's important to keep track of these IV poles as they're important for the stretcher. So we're going to go ahead and put our IV pole right here. Now we're going to focus on this bottom plastic piece. This piece always has a lot of stains on it from different procedures. It's important to once again remember that this is just a basic disinfection at first, and we'll worry about the stains afterwards. Make sure to clean all four corners before starting in the center. That way you know that all you have to do is the center. Okay, we can take this plastic piece and go ahead and prop it back up on the two screws that I showed you. Now we're going to focus on more of the under parts, the gears, the wheel, all the different pieces at the bottom of the stretcher. A lot of these pieces, once again, are covered in grease. That grease is important for the function of the stretcher and is nearly impossible to get out. It is not something that you need to concern yourself with. We're going to make sure to clean these wheel guards, the top piece, and underneath. We want to make sure we get a basic disinfection of the pedals before we worry about aesthetics. So I clean the pedals. That way I know that they're disinfected. The pedals are very dirty, so once again you're going to want to rinse your rag out. Now we're going to focus on more of the gears and the structure of the stretcher. Once again, cleaning the other wheel guard on this side, the top, and underneath. I like to keep my stretcher in a neutral position at this point. That way I can just turn it around. Once again, there's a foot pedal at the beginning of the stretcher. The wheel guard, and the rest of the pedals. Now we focus on the structure of the stretcher on the other side. Once again, this is grease for the gears. It is not important for you to get that off, and it's important for the function of the stretcher. Okay, now that we feel that the stretcher has been disinfected, we can go ahead and worry about the different crevices and stains. First thing I like to do is go ahead and put my stretcher back in a lock position. These are rubber guards for the stretcher for maneuvering around hallways and such. We want to go ahead and take those rubber guards off and set them next to our IV pole. Next, we're going to take our nail polish remover, which comes in packets. I like to use 2 packets at once. That way it doesn't dry out so quickly. I take my nail polish remover pads and I focus on this strip that I just revealed after I took off the rubber. Also, I like to focus on these crevices. These crevices get all kinds of dirt and stains inside of them. It's important that we make sure that every inch of the stretcher is disinfected and looking good. I take the tips of the pads and I make sure to get inside of there. Also, I'd like to point out that these screws, over time these screws either rust or accumulate dirt on the outside. So we want to make sure to get the edges of the screws very well. Sometimes paint, especially on black areas, will show up pretty prevalent. We want to go ahead and take our nail polish removers and get the paint off. That way we keep the stretchers looking new. This crevice is also very important. A lot of dirt and Benadine get in the corners, so we want to make sure and cover that. Okay, we can go ahead and throw out our one packet of nail polish remover and grab another one. Now we'll focus on the other side. Once again, we're focusing on this spot that I revealed after I took off the rubber guard. There's a good example of paint right there. We want to make sure and get that. Also, it looks like there's a little bit of Benadine on here. After you've used the pad to clean up the Benadine, the pad is pretty much useless, and we want to go ahead and grab another one. I grab two at a time. Getting my pad inside these little crevices. Okay. Another chemical that you're going to use very sparingly is called cavi wipes. Cavi wipes are good for getting out moderate stains and getting in the cracks that you can no longer get into with the pad. We're going to go ahead and take our cavi wipe, put my stretcher in the lock position, and I focus on these right here. This is also a guard for the stretcher. I want to make sure that I get inside these cracks, so I take my pad and I swish it back and forth. These pads are very powerful and they're very good for disinfection. Now I can take my pad and go ahead and put the railing down. The railing in the down position allows me to get under these little bars right here. So I put my cavi wipe inside the bar and I swish it back and forth. If I notice any stains on the black part here, I make sure and cover that. And now we can repeat for the other side. Stretcher in the lock position. I'm going to focus again on this guard. Put my railing in the down position. Getting out any stains that I saw that I haven't gotten. Okay, now that that's done, we can focus on underneath the stretcher, particularly underneath these bars here. These are some of the surfaces that you couldn't see at first, and now we're going to focus on the detail of them. So we're going to go ahead and take our nail polish pads, 2 at a time, as I said I liked. Stretcher in the lock position. I get under the stretcher and look at the back side, making sure to get every little crevice and stain that I see. Okay, now we can do the other side. I grab 2 fresh pads. I get underneath the stretcher and focus on these bars and the crevices. Once I feel that all the stains are off, I go ahead and I focus on the petals. I like to make the petals shine, and that way they're more aesthetically pleasing. For this, I either use a liquid form of the nail polish remover or Fantastic. I spray the foot petals. Remembering that there's a foot pedal in the front. I take our very sophisticated tool, the toothbrush, and I scrub the petals, getting any of the excess dirt that we didn't get in the original disinfection. Now that I feel that the foot pedals are complete, I go ahead and I grab the unfiltered air and I spray them off. This is the quickest and most efficient way to dry them. That way that they're not slippery when the doctors go to use them. Sometimes during your cleaning you'll notice that these railings are loose. Make sure to notify the maintenance personnel of it. Finally, to clean a stretcher, we take our cavi wipes again and we make sure and wipe off the wheels, both the sides of the wheels and the wheel itself. You can notice here that there's a stain on it. Now, cavi wipes may not get that off. You may have to go back to nail polish remover. But in this case, cavi wipes work. Now that the wheels have been cleaned, go ahead and divide your cavi wipe up into 4 different sections. 1 section for each wheel. So I'm going to go ahead and use this top section for this wheel. Next, I'm going to flip the rag over from the dirty side to the clean side and clean this wheel. Open the rag up. It's important to remember that once you're done cleaning the wheels, that you need to change your gloves as they're dirty and you're cleaning a sterile instrument. The last thing I like to focus on before I put the stretcher back together is I like to focus on the different sticky spots of the stretcher. During procedures, they either tape a patient's head to the headrest or use different medical tape for different things. This medical tape sticks to the stretcher, especially in places that you wouldn't want it to be. So we take our product Unisolve, and we especially focus once again on the back part of the stretcher, on the handles where most of the OR staff touches. We take our Unisolve and we go back over the handle, getting all the sticky residue off and ready for the next patient. After the handles are clean, we focus on this section on the side of the headrest, where the residual of the tape may be. Making sure to get as much off as possible. Finally, I like to focus on this section right here, which seems to get full of marks. I take my nail polish pad and I wipe it off. Okay, now we can focus on putting the stretcher back together. We're going to first start with these rubber guards. These rubber guards need to be disinfected before they're put back on the stretcher. I take a canvas wipe. I'm making sure to put my thumb in the crevice and I wipe these off. Once one is done, I line up the tip of the rubber with the beginning of the black and just press it back on. Lining up with the tip and pressing it back on. Okay, now we can put the stretcher back in a flat position. We can grab this crank and go ahead and crank it back down. And lay the foot section back down. Now we can go get our pad and our headrest. Take our pad back off the elevator and lay it flat upside down. It's important to remember that when cleaning a stretcher, that this is the part that the OR staff does not clean in between cases. So this part needs to be done first before you lay it back down on your clean stretcher. I like to cover at least half of the pad and once again the four corners, making sure to get underneath this flap. And then I rinse my rag. Do the top section of the bottom of the mat, and now you're ready to flip it over. To line up the pad, I like to take the corner and make sure it lines up evenly and flush with the metal and the end of the stretcher. Once again, I like to go over the four corners and half of the stretcher. Okay, now we're ready for the headrest. The headrest first needs to be cleaned, but also you need to get the sticky substances off the side. They tape patients' heads to the headrest, so it's important to get the tape back on. We're going to go ahead and use our Unisolve or nail polish remover to get this substance off. Remember that your headrest isn't disinfected yet, so it's important to not put it back on your clean stretcher. Clean one side of my headrest, and I clean the other side of my headrest. Okay, feels pretty good. Now I'm going to go back to my rag with my vindicator, and I'm going to give my headrest a quick clean, remembering to get underneath this flap. Clean the bottom of my headrest. That way I can stick it back on to the head of my stretcher. It's important to make sure that the headrest is even as a patient's going to be laying in this bed. So I go ahead and stick it back onto the stretcher. Now I can finish cleaning my headrest. And your stretcher is complete. I lower the stretcher back down using the center foot pedal. And lay the backrest back up to the original position. Now you want to go ahead and take your stretcher from the elevator back up to the operating room. Not forgetting your IV pole. Alright, let's watch it.